What if I told you that some of the most talented rock bands of the 1970s just disappeared overnight? You're probably wondering which bands could have been big enough to matter, but somehow got completely forgotten by history. Maybe you're thinking about whether these bands had hit songs you might have heard somewhere, or perhaps you're curious about what actually happened to them and why they vanished when other bands from the same era became legends. The truth is, the 1970s music industry was brutal. While Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd were conquering the world, dozens of equally talented bands were getting swallowed up by bad record deals, internal conflicts, and just plain bad timing. Today, we're diving into 10 rock bands that should have been household names, instead became music history's greatest mysteries. Band 1, Dust. Let's start with Dust, a hard rock trio from New York that burned bright and fast between 1969 and 1972. These guys were producing some of the heaviest, most innovative sounds of the early 70s, with their self-titled debut album showcasing a raw power that predated much of what we now call heavy metal. Richie Wise's guitar work was absolutely ferocious, and their song Pull Away featured riffs that would make Tony Iommi jealous. But just as they were gaining momentum, the band imploded due to creative differences and the pressures of touring. By 1972, they were done, leaving behind only 2 albums and a handful of devoted fans who still argue they were ahead of their time. What makes Dust's disappearance even more tragic is that their sound influenced countless bands that came after them, yet they never got the recognition they deserved during their brief existence. Band 2, Atomic Rooster. Speaking of bands that deserve better, Atomic Rooster emerged from the ashes of the crazy world of Arthur Brown, with Vincent Crane's Hammond organ leading the charge. Their 1970 hit Tomorrow Night showed real commercial potential, and their heavy organ-driven sound was completely unique in the rock landscape. Carl Palmer's drumming before he joined Emerson, Laken Palmer, was absolutely thunderous, giving the band a rhythm section that could level buildings. But constant lineup changes plagued them throughout their career, and by the mid-70s, they'd cycled through so many musicians that the original vision was completely lost. The band's inability to maintain a stable lineup ultimately cost them their shot at lasting success, even though their musical contributions were genuinely groundbreaking. Band 3, Budgie from Wales came Budgie. A power trio that combined heavy metal intensity with progressive rock complexity in ways that shouldn't have worked, but absolutely did. Burke Shelley's bass playing was revolutionary, handling both rhythm and lead duties, while his distinctive vocals soared over Tony Borge's crushing guitar work. Songs like Bread Fan and Napoleon Bonaparte's 1 and 2 demonstrated a band that could write both radio-friendly anthems and epic musical journeys. Despite influencing everyone from Metallica to Soundgarden, Budgie never achieved mainstream success, partly due to poor distribution and limited promotional support from their various record labels. Their story proves that sometimes being ahead of the curve means being left behind by an industry that wasn't ready for your innovation. Band 4, Cactus Cactus, brought together some serious musical pedigree when they formed in 1970, featuring Vanilla Fudge's Carmine Appice and Tim Bogert, alongside guitarist Jim McCarty and vocalist Rusty Day. Their blues-based hard rock was both powerful and sophisticated, with Appice's drumming providing a thunderous foundation for McCarty's searing guitar work. Their cover of Parchman Farm became a cult classic, and their original compositions showed a band capable of both crushing heaviness and surprising subtlety. However, internal tensions and the lure of other projects constantly pulled the members in different directions, preventing them from ever fully capitalizing on their considerable talents. The band's revolving door membership meant they never developed the consistency needed to build a lasting fan base. Band 5, Captain Beyond. When members of Deep Purple, Iron Butterfly, and Johnny Winter's band came together to form Captain Beyond, expectations were sky high. Their 1972 debut album delivered on that promise, blending heavy rock with psychedelic elements and progressive song structures that were light years ahead of most of their contemporaries. Rod Evans' vocals perfectly complemented Larry Reinhardt's guitar wizardry, while the rhythm section provided both power and precision. Their live performances were legendary among those who witnessed them, featuring extended jams and musical explorations that could leave audiences speechless. Unfortunately, the band's experimental nature made them difficult to market. Band 6, Leaf Hound. England's Leaf Hound may have only released one album, but Growers of Mushroom from 1971 stands as one of the heaviest, most uncompromising rock records of its era. Peter French's vocals were raw and powerful, while the guitar work created walls of sound that were genuinely intimidating. The band's approach to heavy rock was so extreme that it alienated some listeners, while absolutely captivating others who were ready for something truly intense. Their timing was particularly unfortunate, as they emerged just as the music industry was beginning to embrace heavier sounds, but before the infrastructure existed to properly support such extreme music. Band 7, May Blitz.
Came upon the
May Blitz represented everything exciting about early 70s hard rock, combining crushing riffs with unexpected melodic sensibilities and a rhythm section that could make the earth shake. Their 1970 self-titled debut showcased a band that understood both power and dynamics, capable of creating moments of genuine beauty alongside passages of devastating heaviness. Tony Newman's drumming was particularly noteworthy, providing complex patterns that elevated the music beyond simple heavy rock into something approaching art. The band's Canadian origins may have worked against them in an era when the music industry was heavily focused on British and American acts. Band 8, Gun, not to be confused with the later Scottish band of the same name.
people like you and me.
The original Gun was a British trio whose 1968 to 1969 output deserved far more attention than it received. Adrian Gervitz's guitar work was both technically impressive and emotionally compelling, while the band's rhythm section provided a solid foundation for some genuinely adventurous musical explorations. Their blend of hard rock and progressive elements anticipated many developments that wouldn't become mainstream until years later. The band's brief existence was partly due to the rapidly changing musical landscape of the late 60s, which saw many innovative acts struggle to find their place in an increasingly commercialized industry. Band 9, Jerusalem.
It built the boat on dry ground, far away from sea, as God had said to Noah.
Jerusalem's story is one of the most frustrating in rock history, as they possessed all the elements necessary for success, but were derailed by circumstances beyond their control. Their heavy, riff-driven sound was perfectly suited to the early 70s rock scene, and their songwriting showed real promise for long-term development. The band's live performances were reportedly explosive, featuring extended jams and musical interactions that demonstrated a genuine chemistry between the members. However, personal problems and business complications prevented them from ever properly capitalizing on their potential, leaving behind only tantalizing hints of what might have been. Band 10, High Tide.
Everything is gonna be alright. Everything is gonna be alright.
High Tide's approach to heavy rock was so unique and uncompromising that they seemed to exist in their own musical universe entirely. Their use of violin alongside traditional rock instrumentation created textures that were both beautiful and terrifying, while their commitment to extended musical explorations put them firmly in the progressive camp. The band's 1969 debut, Sea Shanties, remains a masterpiece of experimental heavy rock, featuring compositions that were simultaneously accessible and challenging. Their inability to find a wider audience was partly due to their refusal to compromise their artistic vision for commercial considerations. These 10 bands prove that talent and timing don't always align in the music industry. Each of these groups possess the musical ability and creative vision to become major players in rock history. But circumstances, bad luck, and industry politics conspired to cut their stories short. Their music remains as powerful today as it was 50 years ago, waiting for new generations of listeners to discover what the original audiences missed. Don't let their stories end here. Seek out their music, share it with fellow rock fans, and help ensure that these forgotten pioneers finally get the recognition they always deserved. Subscribe for more deep dives into music history's greatest mysteries, and tell us in the comments which of these bands surprised you the most. The rock revolution had more heroes than history remembers, and it's time we brought them back into the light.